It's been known for a while that Persona 6 is in development. Something that Persona series director Naoto Hiroka has said is they feel that the title Persona 6 turns out to be must be something that surpasses the massive success and acclaim of Persona 5. The same way Persona 5 strove to surpass 4, and so on. I'd like to speak today as a Persona fan for what I would want the future of the Persona series to look like. Okay, look, you're going to get spoiled in this video. I'm spoiling Persona games. If you haven't played all the Persona games, come back. Don't go away forever. Play the games, and you finish all the Persona games, then come back and press play, if you don't want to get spoiled. If you're watching on your YouTube app, I'm sorry, you can't use the app until you finish all the Persona games, if you don't want to get spoiled. Then you watch this video. So close the app, pause, bye-bye, if you don't want to get spoiled. And you have to play Innocent Sin and Eternal Punishment. Andy, Sarah, Nathaniel, way in the back over there. If you don't want to get I think something that's so cool about Persona is how much it's evolved since the original. And that wouldn't have happened if every game iterated as heavily as some might want it to moving forward. Persona has become a phenomenon and Atlus's biggest moneymaker. I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest for the future to be giving us a world with Persona 7, 8, 9, and maybe even Persona 10 if we haven't all been buried by then. I don't think that all of the concepts introduced starting in Persona 3 should be axed completely. I mean, I think things like the calendar and the social link system, those are staples of Persona at this point. It happens all the time that a mechanic gets added in a later entry in a series and then establishes itself to be integral to all future entries going forward. I think something that has come to define Mega 10, including Persona, a staple of the combat, is giving the player a reward for hitting a weakness. Not simply a boost in damage, but a broader advantage in the way of turns, buffs, and extra hits. I think that's a really good basic concept, but it's also about how you give that reward that really determines if you've made a good battle system. I really love if they tried to explore something new. I know that One More is a really satisfying system that has been iterated on beautifully, especially with the incentive of pulling out an all-out attack, but I wonder what else they could do with prioritizing weaknesses. I think that the baton pass system that was introduced in Persona 5, it was cool, but if we're sticking with One More, I think that should stay as a reward like it was in Persona 5 for leveling up a social link. I think just giving it to you straight away, like what happens in Persona 3 Reload, gives you a bit much an advantage over the enemy. Unless they want to let the enemies baton pass regularly like you can, I think that would actually end up making for a pretty volatile, easy game over sort of game, which could end up being pretty interesting. But I'm not sure that's the kind of combat system the Persona team wants to make right now. One thing on my wish list, I would love to see a difficulty setting that mimics the easy mode of Persona 3 and Persona 4 on PS2. As well as the original PSP release of Persona 3 Portable. I really like a system that gives you a set 10 full heal revives throughout the whole game. I think that's a really good way of making the game more forgiving without trivializing defeat the way safety mode does in Persona 5. I do think that safety mode is a great game mode, especially because Persona is a very story-heavy game. I think there are a lot of people that are mostly invested in the story, and they should be able to just get through the combat so they can see what's going to happen next. But at the same time, I also like having a difficulty option where you don't have to take a full game over that kicks you to your last save every time you fall in basic combat. The thing about safety mode is you might be in a situation where you're walking the edge. Maybe you're low on SP, low on health. I think in a normal playthrough you'd probably be expected to be using items or considering going back to the real world for the day. But the thing about safety mode is if you're in a tight spot like that, the stakes are really always zero, because even if you're low on energy, you can just die on purpose and get a full revive and full heal. Again, it's a great option for players who only care to see the story. At the same time, it's nice to have something in between. I'd like to weigh the option of choosing to use one of my limited revives or take a game over. I think social links have an opportunity to evolve. From P3 to P4, the party member social links got a lot of extra benefits that made them more engaging, gave them more synergy between its two halves. And then Persona 5 took it even further, with practically every confidant granting a benefit of some kind to the player in combat. And I think Persona 6 should continue taking it in that direction and make bold choices with how they potentially could change social links. Obviously, the most important thing is that the actual content of the link is engaging and interesting, but I'd love to see them played with in ways that haven't been tried yet. Maybe they could change more dynamically with the way the story moves. It's not like the links have been completely isolated from the plot. There's even some that you can only advance after hitting certain points in the story. Persona 3 Reload plays with this idea with the new linked episodes with party members, but I think it would be interesting for the results to not necessarily be negative when going and doing a link later in the story. I think it would be cool too if there was more synergy between the level of your social link and the persona that matches their arcana. Something like powered up skills, hidden level up skills only available when your social link is at a certain level. I just think there's more that can happen between the interactions of the arcana of your social link and the arcana of your persona. Really just examples. More what I'm trying to get at is that I don't want this system to just remain stationary. I believe there's potential for growth and improvement, allowing things to evolve. I think, how do I say this? I just think it might be time to give it a try to not have romance in the social link system. I think it might just be good to let romance be a part of the story. The protagonist really isn't much of a self-insert. I think games like Stardew Valley, which also work on a calendar, have this system where you can romance about 40% of the characters, and that's because it's a game where the protagonist is you. You create the character, and your character is going to be a good fit for the person you, the player, are a good fit for. I honestly believe, with the exception of probably Persona 1, but even then it's a little debatable, the characters have always had predetermined personalities. You can see it in their portrayals in non-video game media, in the games where they're given spoken roles. You can even see it in the dialogue options. I think it's exemplified best with Persona 3 Portable because the two protagonists have kind of different personalities. It's cool. They're kind of two sides of the same coin, opposites externally, but bearing the same pain inside. The good news, the Metaphor Re-Fantasio marketing is showing in many ways that it will be taking a lot of cues from Persona. In fact, the devs have confirmed that there will be social events. And with those social events, no romance. They did point out that romance might be a part of the story, and I think that's good. Straight up canon romance can be a great narrative tool for these kinds of games. Not just for the protagonist's story, but anyone in the games. It could be between the protagonist and a party member. It could be two party members separate of the protagonist. I think separating the romance from player choice gives the characters more versatility. I would love for an emphasis on zodiac signs to return. Character zodiac signs played the biggest role, I think, in Persona 2 Innocent Sin. And it was really cool the way their signs also tied into their characters along with their arcana. I think the system of characters being created for this series based around the major arcana of tarot cards is really cool. It's not something I think they should stop. But I'd love for astrology to be overtly woven into the characters in the story again. it, like tarot, plays a big role in fortune telling and also plays a role in our perceptions of ourselves and others. I think they're the perfect fit for the Persona series, with huge potential for thematic character creation. Persona characters have always been given canon birthdays, and I think this does indicate on some level that they do think about the character's zodiac signs. I just think it would be cool if, there was some iconography to go along with it. If maybe personas could represent zodiac signs rather than tarot cards exclusively. You've got the cards floating around with the characters in the social link menu. It would be cool just to see their sign, their blood type floating around there too. Also, speaking of Persona character birthdays, it's kind of funny to me that, nothing ever happens on a character's birthday. No one's ever having a party or saying anything. I mean, it's just kind of funny that it's like this calendar-based game and they gave all the characters designated birthdays and nothing ever happens on any character's birthday. Maybe that doesn't need to change, it's just a little weird to me. I'd really like, and this might be a real pipe dream, I'd really like if Persona 6 was the final version, at least for a very long time, of Persona 6. This whole re-released fully with extra content thing, like 3 years later, it kind of stings. To be quite honest, I don't know if the sting has ever felt quite as bad as it feels with Shin Megami Tensei 5. Now, I have yet to actually play Vengeance or see much of the new content in the canon of Vengeance, but it really did feel like SMT5 got less than it deserved on the first pass. I think it opens really strong, but it just kind of loses its footing somewhere. And I wonder if it was given more time, would the developers have had a better idea of where things could have gone? Putting this revision behind a later re-release rather than delaying the game so the original project can be refined is naturally going to leave us with jumbled results. With the original release also getting delisted from the eShop as well, it's hard not to get the impression that Atlus agrees that SMT5 was an undercooked project that desperately needed revision. It's just not my thing, and it's so crazy because we're in this age of DLC, like Persona 3 Reload, we've seen episode Aegis being the answer from Persona 3 FES get announced as DLC, and a DLC model just makes more sense. Atlus is really one of the only companies still making games this way. It's a strange choice in this day and age. I see no rational reasoning for the canon of Vengeance not being available as DLC for owners of vanilla SMT5. I hope they consider any content that they might want to add after release, just making it DLC. I know it might be, it might be the kind of thing that takes a couple years. I think people will play it. I'm going to play it. The Elden Ring DLC, it came out 2.5 years after the release of the original game, and people lined up to play it. So yeah, let's really think about the DLC expansion over the entire re-released revision. I also hope whatever extra content gets added, I hope it can feel less tacked on than in Persona 5 Royal. The fight with Yaldabaoth is so deflating because it has all the presentation of a final boss, the climax of the game, and then you beat him and the game is just... it just keeps going, and it's a really weird feeling. Yaldabaoth was such a perfect final boss, I think, for all the themes of Persona 5. It might have just been a matter of timing with the fight against Yaldabaoth taking place in December, but I do have to say that I feel like Persona 4 Golden added the content in a way that wasn't as much of a conflict with the original ending sequence they decided on for the game. Wouldn't it be cool to have a predominantly adult main cast? I'm hardly the first person that's posed this, but it seems to be a pretty divisive desire. On one hand, you've got a series that's traditionally been set around a cast of high school students. High school is a great setting for coming of age, for watching more immature characters learn about life. But on the other hand, you've got what is for many people the best story in all of Persona in the form of Persona 2 Eternal Punishment, which features a majority adult cast. When I think about all the things a Persona game could do with the possibilities of any given adult's life, I think there are a lot of exciting ideas out there. Sure, plenty can be done with a high school setting, but just think about all the creative freedom that would be found from just not feeling the need to be set there every time. In general, I'd love to see the series take itself in wild directions. Does the protagonist always have to be male? Does it always have to be set in high school? Does it always have to take place in Japan? Well, in the case of that last question, it actually doesn't. So there's this game that came out in 1992 for the Super Famicom called Shin Megami Tensei. The original concept for this game was a demon outbreak beginning in Kichijoji in Tokyo, growing into a global-scale conflict ending up in Jerusalem. While Persona 5 was in the very, very early stages, this idea that was abandoned for Shin Megami Tensei due to the difficulties that would come with creating a game on that scale at the time, they were deciding to use a similar concept. A backpacking traveler, quote, flying around to various places with the theme similar to that of a journey of self-discovery, end quote. However, once the devastating earthquake in Japan broke in 2011, plans changed. Director Katsura Hoshino said in the same interview, "At the time, while working on Persona 4 Golden, I had been testing various ideas. But in the midst of thinking about them, the Great East Japan earthquake struck. I felt that suddenly my mood about Japan had changed as I rethought things. I wanted to refocus on Japan rather than direct my feelings to the outside world." Is it a bad thing that plans changed? Absolutely not, because Persona 5 was a fantastic game. But the fact that there was that first concept of Persona 5 is a way to get your imagination running. If that were the game that came out, it would have been wildly different, and also quite a departure from Persona 3 and 4, which are great games in their own right as well, but we're at a point where we've reached 3 games in a row that have a very similar setting and feel. A pretty similar cast, a pretty similar system of gameplay, and I think through these games, we've found some really good ideas. Why am I saying we? I think we've found some great ideas here, everyone. The life sim dungeon crawler hybrid, Persona has not always had these traits, but at this point, that's a part of Persona's unique style and identity. But if we look at it in a way that that's the extent of what makes a Persona game, the possibilities for Persona 6 widen so much in a way that excites me much more than imagining that these same things all have to happen. Why is the Lover's Arcana always represented by a young girl? I mean, I guess I don't not get it, but why not step outside of that for once? The Lover's Arcana represents not only the literal interpretation of love and relationships and cute pink hearts, but also a choice, a crossroads. There's plenty of potential to create unique characters with this Arcana without tapping the same tropes over and over. Look, if Persona 6 comes out and hey, it ends up doing most of these things, we have another high school game that takes place in normal high school in Japan with a male protagonist, a lover's girl, a giant talking worm that was born in the cognitive space, whatever form that may take, mirrors? The game's probably still going to be pretty good. Maybe more than solely Persona 6, this is my hope for the greater future of Persona. That the series is not afraid to let go of long-standing traditions that may begin to hold the series back more than it will retain the huge fan base it's mustered over the last decade. Some rules haven't always been rules. Something to think about.